Thank you. Thank you so much, but I have one simple question. Jamy, who chose the act I was to follow? How mean can you get to an old guy? I mean. But in the spirit of what you've just seen, this remarkable young man doing this really breathtaking demonstration, I will just add something to that. Years ago, I used to do, during my act, I used to do a certain mentalism stunt where I would address the audience and say, I'm going to throw a ping pong ball into the audience to make sure that it was fair. You see, would I cheat? Yeah, but I didn't in this case. Throw the ping pong ball up, and whoever catches that ping pong ball, please stand up. Fell into the lap of a little lady down in the audience, and she stood up looking a little nervous, as most people would. And I said to her, ma'am, I want you to name for me any 4-digit number, please. She stood there rather silently, and there was a little bit of a titter from the audience. And she said, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the audience tittered, you see. And I said, well, no, a random number, just any old 4-digit number at all. 4, 3, 2, 1. And the audience really, he got a bigger laugh that way. And I quieted the audience, and the lady was bewildered. She'd caught a ping pong ball and didn't know what to do with it, And I said, just any random number whatsoever. And she said, I don't know any random numbers. But she was absolutely right. I was the one who had made the terrible mistake like that. I could have said, scramble a phone number of a friend of yours or something like that. But she didn't know any random numbers. No one knows any random numbers. So I had to give her the victory that evening, and I never used the same line again, I can assure you. In any case, I have been asked to address this very full audience on the subject of faith eaters and how to avoid them and what to do about them. The last part of that, what to do about them, I think is to write as many articles and books and pieces and bits of email and such that you possibly can, complaining to people who should have some responsibility in government agencies and municipal, local agencies, as well as federal, because something really should be done about these people. I will just tell you, when I first started to investigate Peter Popoff, now, you may not know that name, or you may, but Peter Popoff was someone that we later thoroughly exposed on the Johnny Carson show, much to my delight. And I made a trip out to a small town in New Mexico where Popoff was to appear. And there was a huge parking lot there, jammed with cars. And I had a film crew with me, and from one of the local stations, and we saw a car pull up, a pretty ratty old car, and an Asian couple with their little boy got out of the car. And my book, The Faith Eaters, is dedicated to this kid. It's hard for me to tell you this. He was walking on aluminum crutches that were very worn and rather bent. His legs were terribly twisted. And his parents and he were both beaming. And the head of the film crew rushed over to him and held a microphone out to the little kid and said, are you here to be healed by Reverend Popoff? And the kid looked up beaming, just beaming from ear to ear, and he said, yes, I'm here so that Reverend Popoff And he looked at his father, and his father was encouraging him. He'd memorized something to say in response to a question like this, obviously. To receive the blessing of Jesus Christ through Reverend Popoff. He finally got it right. And his father nodded like that. And he said, I'm going to throw away these crutches. And I butted in and I said, okay, we'll see him when he comes out after the service. Not thinking that that would happen at all. And he went into the service with his parents. We went in too, and he was, strangely enough, he and his parents were the people who were asked to stand behind a big rope that they had across the back of the auditorium. That's what Popoff did, and still does, and most of the faith healers have done this. Oral Roberts and all the rest of them did this. Stand them back there because these are people who won't improve at all, and that nothing can be done for. And we looked through the whole show, and we saw that he never got up anywhere near the front. And then they left, and we were packing up the van afterwards. I'm sorry, this is difficult. And the kid came walking over to pass by us, and his parents were behind him, weeping copiously. The father saw me, and he took me aside, and he said, and the cameraman rushed over, and he said, we've been to 5 of his healing services now, and he always puts us behind the rope. And we drove 800 miles today to be at this service. And the little man with his crutches, he waved to his father. He said, we're going now. The cameraman turned to me and he said, I can't do this. And I said, fine, we won't do it. The book that I wrote, The Faith Healers, as I said, is dedicated to this little kid. He's still crippled. He's older now. Maybe he's learned something. Maybe he's learned that this is not the thing to do, that this is not going to work, that the faith healers are fakes and they're liars and cheaters, that they don't give a damn about you, they just want your money. This angers me a great deal, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to be getting crazy in front of you, but I have no choice. The faith healers have angered me so much, the cruel farce that they carry on. I met one gentleman who had a job with Oral Roberts when Oral Roberts had the tent show. And there were tent shows all over this country at one time, and not so many auditoriums that were so easily available. And his job was to wait in the truck until all the people had gone into the tent to the service, and they'd been singing hymns at the top of their lungs, of course, and the offering basket had been passed around many, many times and taken into the back of the tent to be counted. And finally, Oral Roberts would walk out there. And this kid's job, he had a pair of very worn crutches, and his job was to run up the aisle on his crutches like this. He wasn't crippled, not crippled at all. This was his job. And to walk up there and say, save me, Reverend Roberts. And they would go down and they would pick him up and put him on the stage. And he had learned to cry. He actually learned, for his part, he learned how to cry. And Oral Roberts would go over to him and heal him. And then he would throw away the crutches, run down the stairs, down the aisle, out the back of the tent, and hide in the truck. That's where he slept, and they'd take him to the next place. That was his job. He also served lunch to the truck drivers and whatnot, but that was his main job, was to act as a cripple for Oral Roberts. I've been through so much on writing that book, The Faith Healers. It really hurt a great deal, having to be interviewing people who had suffered so greatly at the hands of the faith healers. And what can we do about it? What can politicians do about it? What can, as I said earlier, federal and municipal authorities do about it? They don't want to do anything about it because you're questioning God, and you can't question God because God works in mysterious ways. Well, screw that. Peter Popoff showed up at Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I live. That's Florida, if you call that living. And I determined that I was going to go down there and take a look at what he did. Now, I have a standard disguise that I put on. I use the name Adam Jersin, Jersin, which is an anagram for James Randi. No one seems to have noticed that. But now you know. That's a dirty laugh. That must be Jamy. Yeah, there you are. I recognize Jamie's dirty laugh. I've heard it so many times. It's delicious. He cultured that for a long time, just so it would sound that evil. Yeah, I use the name Adam Jersin. I put on a red wig, a brownish red wig, and I dye my beard. This hurts too. I dye it red, and I put in very black contact lenses, so I don't look like myself at all. As a matter of fact, I used to have a pet, a kinkajou. It's a bear-like critter that runs around over your shoulders and stuff. It's a wonderful, wonderful animal. And his name was Sam, and he didn't recognize me when I put in the black contact lenses because that's a recognition thing that animals and humans have for them. Eye color is important in recognizing individuals. So I never handled Sam because he thought I was a dreadful-looking guy, and he probably would have taken a bite out of me if I'd let him loose. But I went as Adam Jersin on many occasions to not to be healed personally, but to take pictures and to manage to move in close. And I will tell you that with the Peter Popoff thing, just how the exposure came about. We exposed him, as I said earlier, on the Johnny Carson show, and we got the material by a rather clever ruse, I would say. I had Banachek, which is the professional name of one of the alpha kids, and that's another story altogether. Read my next book. He went out there with all kinds of identification around his neck, and he got up close to Peter Popoff while Popoff was working, and he came back to me rather excited, and he said, "He's got a hearing aid in his left ear." And I said, "Popoff himself?" And he said, "Yeah." So I thought to myself, self? A man who heals the deaf. He's wearing a hearing aid? I suspect something is not quite right here. And indeed, the next night that we went back, I took a fellow who was, well, I won't necessarily name him, but he's a private investigator, and he dotes on material like this. He worked for me for free. He thought it was a good cause, and he went in festooned the next day with all kinds of electronic equipment, and he went around testing receptacles in the auditorium. And what he was actually doing was trying to pick up on the radio signal that we're pretty sure that Popoff was receiving. And he intercepted one, and I've got the original tape of it, where Popoff walks out after a lot of hallelujahs and such, and you hear a voice saying, "Hello, Petey. This is your wife. Can you hear me? If you can't, you're in deep shit." I got the recording. That's the way they talk to one another, you see. Now, what was happening was Mrs. Popoff was touring the audience in the auditorium in advance of the actual show taking place. It wasn't a service, it was a show. A ratty show, but it was a show. And she would go down the aisles and say, "Hi, I'm Mrs. Popoff. Is Reverend Popoff going to heal you tonight? I see. Write your name down on here and your address, and we will send you, make sure you put your telephone number in too, and we will send you a free subscription to our magazine." And that way they would get the information, you see. What is your ailment? I'll just put that down here so the Reverend Popoff will know when he's writing you to pray to Jesus to heal this disease. That information was all taken backstage, and Mrs. Popoff sat at a transmitter, and Reverend Popoff had the business in his ear, of course, and then, hello, Petey, can you hear me? That was his wife, you see. But I'm going to tell you some of the stuff that I have at home that Peter Popoff doesn't know about. One of his lawyers does. In case Peter Popoff ever decides to sue me because of what I've written about him and what I'm telling you about him now, I have some rather special excerpts from those recording tapes. She spoke to Peter Popoff as he was going down the aisle, yelling, "Hallelujah, praise Jesus," the whole thing, and reading from the Bible. Now, he had slips all through the Bible, you see, and he would turn to a spot in the Bible and read some quotation, and the information that he needed was what is the disease of this person and the other person. And some of the stuff was written inside the book, but most of it was just little slips of paper. So he got down the aisle, and I heard, oh, this is hard to tell you too. I heard Mrs. Popoff over the system saying, she's laughing. And she says, "Oh, Reeford thinks this is so funny because he knows you, Peter. Now, this is your wife talking, remember? Go to the end of the aisle. It's the big black nigger in the wheelchair, and you keep your hands off those tits. I know you, Peter. I'm watching you. Ha, ha, ha." And she's laughing away. And then you see the woman in the wheelchair. She's near death. She's huge. She must weigh 350, 400 pounds. She's in a specially constructed wheelchair with reinforcement in it. A pathetic figure. And Peter Popoff's wife is up in the engineering room there laughing at this woman. Then we saw in the same episode, that was in San Francisco, I remember, the same episode, the same time in the same arena, there was a man with testicular cancer. He looked like he had a shopping bag literally in front of him. It was a dreadful thing to see, in a supporting sling in a wheelchair, and he had two doctors with him. And they were laughing so loudly in the engineering room from which they were broadcasting that they couldn't get the message across to Peter Popoff. What kind of people are these? These are cruel, callous, uncaring people in all ways. And the scene I saw at the end of that one, we looked out the back window. It was too dark outside to get video of it, unfortunately. Two huge Samsonite cases full of money and checks were being tossed into the back of a limousine, one after the other, and off went the Popoffs to the local restaurant because they were hungry. And they had masses of cash with them. Well, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, when he came to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, we searched through the garbage afterwards, and we came up with dozens of checks that he hadn't bothered with. They were for $10 or $15. That's a lot of work, friends, to write on a deposit slip. 10 dash dash, next, 10. Oh, what a bore. He threw away $10 and $15 checks, and in some cases, $25 checks as well, because he couldn't be bothered with them. That's how callous and uncaring these people are. And we found a note in there that had been handed to Peter Popoff down near the end of the service. In Elizabeth Popoff's handwriting, "Peter, hurry the hell up, I'm hungry." We've got all that stuff. We've got a box full of it. A box full of checks that were never cashed. This is very discouraging, folks. We have to get a system going whereby law enforcement is going to move in on these people And we can't do a damn thing about it because you can't get politicians interested in coming out against anything that's against God or one of God's ministers. You've got to be very careful of that because people won't vote for you. Is that the kind of mentality it is running our country? Looking at the Republican convention right now and all the mentions of God and his wonders and such, it's like being at a church service, not a political rally at all. We've got to get our wits together in this country. We've got to get organized. We've got to fight this sort of belief and this preoccupation that people have with something in the sky or under the earth or angels or whatever. I'm sick and tired of it. I want to be relieved of the burden of having to take this on my shoulders because the letters I get on email and in the post, they are so pathetic. And I will not send out form letters. I don't answer email with form letters either or form comments. No. Each one is individually answered. I gladly give the time to it. I'd rise sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning and catch up on it on the computer. I want personal notes from me that I really mean sincerely to go out to these people when they ask me, what can I do about it? I have met with families in the library at the James Randi Educational Foundation with closed doors where the whole family sits around the table weeping and says that their mother or whoever the patriarch of the family is has cashed in all the CDs and has sold the antique furniture and everything to send to some faith healer someplace or another. And they're broke. They owe money. She's taken another mortgage on the house. They can't pay the mortgage and they're destitute. What can be done about it? I have to tell them, I don't know. You'll have to find yourself a lawyer who might be interested in serving you pro bono. I really don't know what to tell you. I wish I did. This is a desperate situation. The faith healers are only one variety of religious scam, of course. They're the talking to the dead people, of course, like John Edward and such. What did Shakespeare say? Why, I too can speak to the dead, but when I speak to them, will they answer? It's something to that effect. I'm sorry, I don't remember my Shakespeare that well, but he'll forgive me, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Yeah. Or thank you very much. I don't know where he went. Folks, this group of people seated in front of me here, it's so refreshing me to look into your faces. Because I know that you feel very much the same way I do. That the faith healers and the other people who talk to the dead, the John Edwards and the Sylvia Browns, that harpy, the Talons, as I call her, with the long fingernails. One of these days, I just hope she goes to scratch her nose and cuts her throat. Save somebody else the trouble. And she might very well do that. Please, Sylvia, please. With Sylvia Brown, by the way, she agreed on, as I'm sure you know, she agreed on the Larry King show, 9 years ago now, I believe it is. She agreed to take the $1 Million Challenge that the James Randi Educational Foundation offers. Now, you know about the $1 Million Challenge, the MDC as we call it. The $1 Million Challenge involves a simple offer. We will give you $1 million if you can prove any paranormal, occult, or supernatural event or claim of any kind under good observing conditions. That's all. Very simple, all in one sentence. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of applications from all over the world. And we've done hundreds of tests of people from all over the world. And Sylvia Brown, we sort of tricked her into it. Would I do that? Yes, absolutely. We tricked her into it on the Larry King show, and Larry King went along with it. He said, will you accept the $1 Million Challenge? He said, oh yes, I'll accept that. Anything he wants, I can prove it. And Larry King said, and he looked at the camera and he said, and I will make sure that Sylvia Browne does accept. That was, what, 8, 9 years ago, I've forgotten exactly now. But he never went after her to do this sort of thing. He dropped it too because he had other more sensational things to show at that time. But some reporters got to her. And dear Sylvia, she sometimes puts her foot right down her throat. Not only into her mouth, but down her throat. And she hadn't come to me, and they called me, and they said, have you heard from Sylvia Browne yet? No, I haven't heard. And so they called her. And she said to one of them, she said, oh, yes, him. I don't know how to reach him. She talks to dead people. I've still got some life in me. Not much, but I've got some. I can hear you when you call, Sylvia. Well, I took it upon myself to send her a registered letter. Now, I had a return address on it that couldn't be read. If she had seen a real address there and it identified with me, she wouldn't have accepted it, of course, but she signed for it. And I gave her the names of all my living relatives and a couple of dead ones, too. It couldn't hurt. If she could certainly contact them, of course. And the phone numbers and email addresses, the whole thing. Still didn't hear a thing from her. And then the excuse she came up with, I know you're going to love this one. A reporter asked her from a major magazine, have you contacted James Randi yet? I've tried. I've sent letters all over. She hadn't sent one damn letter, of course. And she said finally, I don't want to answer the challenge now. And the reporter raised his eyebrows and she said, yes, because he's not a godly person. That's true. Absolutely true. Yes, with a vengeance. But wouldn't that make me a much more attractive object for her to doom and take the $1 million that the JRF owns? Wouldn't that have been the thing to do? You would think so, that she'd want to take the $1 million just to make us look rather foolish. But she hasn't done it, and she won't do it. And she continues on, and she gets $850 for a seance over the phone, and you have a 2-year waiting period because she's booked up solidly. Is there anybody in this audience who makes $850 for a 20-minute phone call? I don't think so. We got the lights up and we still can't see anybody who makes that kind of money. It's a ridiculous situation that we can't do something about this harpy and other people just like her, the John Edwards and the other folks as well. This is an incredible situation under which we should not have to labor. I don't want to bear up to this sort of thing. I think it should be done by law enforcement. Where are the politicians who will get interested enough that they will go after these tom-tom thumpers who are screaming for Jesus all the time? I don't know. If you know where I can find one, Claude Pepper in Florida. That used to be one, and he went after them to a certain period. He's no longer with us, but I want someone to replace someone like Claude Pepper and get out there and say what you have to say. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your patience during this tirade, and I know I got a little crazy on it, but I think you're going to understand why, and I hope that you're equally incensed about this situation.
In the absence of law enforcement agencies going after these people, what do you see as the role of magicians and mentalists and people who know the arts of deception? What do you see as sort of their role? I know there's a historical tradition of magicians like Houdini going after fake psychics, fake mediums. And to what extent do you think it sort of behooves people who are expert in this craft to take on the role of outing these people?
Okay, I will tell you in passing that I just received a very considerable honor from the Magic Castle in Los Angeles, and at that ceremony I was asked to talk to essentially all magicians and their spouses and whatnot. So they were very experienced in the field. And I appealed to them, and I addressed it this way, that the Society of American Magicians and the International Brotherhood of Magicians, both very reputable and very sizable organizations of professional and amateur magicians, well known all around the world. At one time when Houdini was president of the SAM, the Society of American Magicians, he had an occult committee there working very hard, and our good friend Bob Steiner as well, who was president of the SAM at one time, a few years ago. He was very, very active in having the occult committee investigate these people, and then suddenly they dropped it. They just lost interest in the thing. And I think, Jamy, you'll agree with me, I'm sure, on this, that there are two kinds of magicians out there. People who think that we're doing a good job by opposing the fakers and the liars and the cheaters and the swindlers out there.
And people who think, as Penn Jillette puts it, that guys like Uri Geller are just colleagues with work.
Yeah. Penn Jillette doesn't have any sympathy for Uri Geller. Let's not imply that, of
exactly
course.
the point. But,
yeah.
But there is a breed. And also with the popularity of mentalism, too, I think in a way that may also have had an effect.
Yes.
Because there has always been a long-standing dispute in the magic community, and especially in the mentalist community, of whether what we do is a responsible thing. There are people who say we have no business trying to out the Uri Gellers of the world.
And their opinion is, generally speaking, and we certainly disagree with this, that stupid people are stupid people and they deserve to be swindled. That's not true. That is not true at all. And the magicians, and I call upon them again at this moment, I call upon the magicians to get organized and get organizations together and committees and whatnot to oppose these people and to make public statements about it, because any media outlet will welcome having you on their Rolodex, electronic, of course. Oh yeah, I'm not that old. Yeah,
yeah you are.
Yeah, I am. I'll cough to show it, yes. But it's true. We, the magicians, we really owe a debt to our audiences. They allow us to make a hell of a good living and enjoy it, doing it, and entertain them. What a joyous arrangement to have an audience that enjoys what you do and you enjoy doing it. A great arrangement. It's just a great arrangement, and it can't be equaled, I think. So they owe us as well, the magicians. They owe all the rest of their public to cooperate and get the occult committees going for the IBM, International Brotherhood of Magicians, and the SAM, the Society of American Magicians. And so this is an appeal to them. If there are any magicians in the audience who disagree with me, get backstage, and I'm ready for you.
And it's a dispute that will never be resolved, but by the same token, the intersection between magicians and critical thinking, it has a long historic tradition that we are continuing, but that goes back not only to Houdini, but actually over 4 centuries in the literature. And it does continue today. The issue of the organizations, yes, that's something that seems to have fallen by the wayside, but there's still plenty of magicians in the community who try and protect the public from deception, and that's what our expertise is. Randi always says, and now I say it, that we are experts in deception. Our expertises are narrow but deep. We know how to fool people, and we know how to recognize when people are being fooled.
Yeah.
Over here? Okay, next, please.
In one of your previous appearances here at NECSS, there was a talk of a script based on the Alpha Project floating around Hollywood. If that script ever gets made, who would you like to play you in the movie?
Who would you like to play him?
Yes.
Himself?
Randy. Randy.
Okay, so if they ever make a movie of the Alpha Project, who should play you?
The Alpha Kids should play it. It should play the part of the Alpha Kids.
Right.
Me?
Well, they're not kids
it's
anymore.
hard to choose, Paul Muni isn't still around.
You're that old. Okay. So no
No, I have
casting
no ideas
suggestions?
whatsoever, but I'd have to approve them, of course, and test them on a few card tricks.
I think Steve's hair is, starting to go gray. It might just be time we could.
It might be.
get
We could
Steve to play
segue him
you.
into the
Exactly.
part.
We
Yes,
kind of
yes.
move everything up a generation.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Next, please.
Wouldn't the first step in tackling the question of of fraud in the name of religion, be to approach the issue piecemeal, where fraud, which is strictly secular, truth in advertising, etc., is enforced by the government, rather than left to lawyers to file a lawsuit, which is the general tradition here, as opposed to, you mentioned earlier, the case of Australia, where there are government and quasi-governmental bodies with enforcement power to demand that companies return money to people they've misled.
Yeah, well, I wish I knew more about the law, frankly. It's something I'm sure, well, where's Jay Feldman?
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly laws against fraud, and the problem is, well, there's a number of problems. There's no one single problem, as Randy points out. Nobody really wants to go near trying to prosecute churches for fraud in this kind of, when they're making a spiritual demonstration. Mm-hmm. Now we get into an argument about where do you draw the line, although obviously we think there are places you can clearly draw the line. And even when it comes to storefront psychics, there are disputes in the law of whether or not, how easy or difficult it is even to prosecute them. There are always cases, just the other day, or the other week, of a fortune teller that was taking people.
That was the Marx family, yeah.
Amounts of money.
The same old Marx family, yeah.
Exactly, again, yeah.
Linda Marx, yeah.
So, psychics do get prosecuted for fraud, but they tend not to get prosecuted for fraud until they've really taken big chunks of money. And it's very hard to get at the little pieces that they're chipping away from, that they're trying to chip away from every person who walks through the door.
Yeah, and a good friend of mine, who I've never met, but we've been friends for years by mail, is Sanal Edamaraku in India.
Good night.
Thank you. And he is a great man who has come out against all the gurus and the wonder workers, the Jadawalas in India. And he is now threatened with serious jail time because 2.3% of Indians in India are Roman Catholic. And yet the Roman Catholic influence there is so strong because they have brought this action against him. They want him arrested and put in jail because he questioned a miracle where sewage water was coming down through a wall in one of the churches and dripping out at the foot of a statue. And people were gathering it up and taking it home as holy medicine or whatever.
Praise Jesus.
Yeah, just insane stuff. And the church is now saying, oh no, we don't make any comment on it. If the people want to gather the water, that's okay with us, as long as they put some money on the plate, I'm sure, on Sunday.
You can read more about this. If you're not aware, just recently, Randy has begun to write a regular blog column, is it weekly, I think, for Wired. I guess some of which is going to move to the magazine.
Yes, it's going to move into the printed magazine.
So I think you've written 4 or 5 pieces so far.
Yeah.
And the most recent is about this problem with this in India, where this guy really needs your support. So I encourage you to go look at that online. He also wrote an excellent piece about what we were discussing a few minutes ago about the role of magicians and that magicians play as help, not just in not just in this narrow kind of sense, but in the sense of helping science and helping scientists, which is often misunderstood. Nobody's saying that we're here to advise scientists about their particular specialties or about statistical analyses or whatever. What we're here to do is, and this is a message that goes back to Houdini in the earliest days of psychical research, is, again, we have that expertise in deception. And all the scientific and academic training in the world does not train you in deception. We don't get fooled just to fool the slow students in the class. We get paid to fool everybody, including the smart ones. And anyone can be fooled by expert deception. And after all, you don't get a bunch of sneaky amoeba joining a meeting on the slide going, hey, let's fool the big guy. So if you are looking at an area where fraud is likely, and we have a long history of fraud in the parasciences, then it takes one to catch one, and this is where you need our expertise in deception. So,
an example. I was in Boston quite some years ago, and David Copperfield's show was in Boston at the time, and I guess he heard that I was there. He somehow got some passes to me, and I won't mention his name. No, later.
Later.
Very secretly and
Later.
quietly downstairs.
Later.
Yes, a prominent scientist at MIT was standing nearby, and I said, I almost said his name. Yeah, would you like to go? And he said, oh yeah, by all means. So we went that night, and David had seated us in the front row where you can't see anything but his nostrils. And so we moved back 4 or 5 rows, and we had excellent seats in that position. And he came out and he did his flying, the famous flying where he actually literally flies around
Really
the
beautiful.
stage. Oh, an astonishing illusion, just astonishing. And the fellow beside me said, oh, this is very dangerous. I said, no, he won't fall. He's very... No, I mean, the electromagnetic field they set up, they obviously have, I didn't tell you this? No, they obviously have a pool of liquid nitrogen underneath the stage, rotating around, and that produces a superconductivity. And I looked at him and I said, no, and I whispered one word to him, and he said, I don't see anything. I said, that's why it's called an illusion. But he actually had a fantastic explanation. It would have cost $1 million to make for that theater alone.
But there's a really interesting lesson in that, as Randy would be quick to tell you, which is that not just scientists, but smart people in general, when they are faced with something that fools them, like a good magic trick, they tend to invent elaborate, complex answers.
Within their expertise, within their own expertise.
Yes,
yeah.
within their expertise or within somehow, one of the things, if you saw the movie The Prestige, one of the wonderful things, I had nothing to do with it. One of the wonderful things about The Prestige, and the magic consultants on that some of them are friends of mine, but one of the wonderful things about that is that Prestige doesn't really reflect anything that's real about magic at all, but what it does do is it fulfills the audience's expectations, because the explanations and mechanics that are portrayed are incredibly complex and arcane. And people want to think that what fools you must be incredibly complex or arcane, because I couldn't be fooled by a simple trick. But the principles of magic tend to be fairly simple. It's all the stuff we build on top, and all the psychology and performance, all these other multi-layers, very delicate things that actually make an illusion effective, not usually the basic method. And how does Uri Geller or any of these idiots, how do they bend a spoon? What's the method for bending a spoon? Well, don't look now, but they bend it when you're not looking.
That's it. That's the whole explanation.
That's the method. But the hard part, the skillful part, is to convince you that you never looked away and that there was no opportunity, for you to not be looking. That's the skillful part of the method, and that's the part of the method that non-magicians find it very difficult to understand. And this is where you need the magician, because anyone can be what we call misdirected, but misdirected is not just making you look away, it's actually fooling your mind, not your eye. That's why you need magicians to see through that.
Next case.
Someone over here.
Over here, sorry.
Hi, James. I met you about 15 years ago at the American Physical Society meeting.
I'm not responsible, I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Those charges were
Never
dropped.
saw the woman before in my life.
And since then, I've truly admired and respect your work. Outside you told me that I told you you were one of my heroes, and you said that you questioned my ability to choose my heroes.
Shoot higher.
But what I want to ask is, I recently attended a David Lynch Foundation course on transcendental meditation or whatnot, and this is just one of the many events that I attend where people have all sorts of crazy claims and pseudoscientific beliefs. And I got up and I said, this really doesn't make any sense, and I opened my view of my skepticism. And of course, I'm always proud to be humiliated in public in the name of skepticism. My worry was that it was packed with medical doctors from the NIH actually doing now research and being funded to research this. And I connect that to the increase in government funding towards all these claims. And it's incredibly disturbing. And as a young person, or not that young, but I would like to ask for your advice on what exactly we can do when we face people like that and institutions of that sort.
Well, I'll give you an example of exactly that same thing. Harvard Medical School is now offering an advanced course for physicians in acupuncture, which has been tested endlessly for centuries, and it does not work in any way. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about, and it'll be in my next book. So there. And this is Harvard Medical School. This is not just some place from Podunk, Kentucky or whatever. This is Harvard Medical School, and they're offering at a very, very high cost a course for physicians. And they will be able to walk away from this with a piece of paper to put on their wall saying that they took this course in acupuncture, and that means that Harvard Medical School endorses it. Now, I don't think they say any place that they endorse it, but they take the money from the physicians who attend that classroom. The point is, when you hear about this kind of thing, write to the people, in this case, Harvard Medical School, for example, and tell them, it has been tested endlessly and endlessly. It does not work, and it's a farce, and it's a superstition. Why are you offering courses in this sort of thing? Whether you receive a response or not is a different matter altogether, but it gives you a great deal of satisfaction to fire these things off and do it repeatedly. And send it to your local newspaper, too, and say that you sent this letter and they didn't respond.
My guess is you may have had those, if there were government medical people there, it might have been from the Office of Alternative Medicine.
Yes,
this is a
exactly.
relatively recent development, that was pushed through by
Senator.
Yes, Harkin.
Thank you.
So he represents the Wu contingent, but actually the alternative medicine industry, which of course is no shortage of money. But that office continues to come under fire and under serious criticism, and I think that's. I read a pretty public piece recently, I can't recall where, that was talking about the money wasted by that office, which is a claim that can clearly be made, not just in the generic way where we say we already know that there's so much nonsense, but in the fact that now they have a record of having spent so much money on so many studies, and they have nothing to show for it.
No, zero, actually
Right.
zilch. Yeah. Not one positive test that came up positive. Now,
Exactly.
that's a record, you got to admit that.
Yeah, it's bad science. So that's a case where I do think that writing the letter to your representatives in Congress, whoever your representatives are, in that case, is an actual powerful and effective thing to do. It's your tax money. It is, this is created by an office that's basically there by dint of special interests, and it's tax dollars being wasted, and this is a favorite thing of the Congress to talk about tax dollars being wasted. Well, if ever tax dollars was being wasted, right? And being wasted in support of special interest as well. So I really think that's, as far as the Office of Alternative Medicine goes, it's a great example. Write your congressman.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Over here.
I was wondering if you are aware of any efforts or have an opinion on how effective it might be. Sorry if I'm probably going to make people cringe here, but the possibility of reaching out to more progressive religious communities to be allies in the fight against faith healers types who are, from their point of view, exploiting something very valuable to them to victimize, as they would call it, their brothers and sisters in Christ. And it would also, if this would be an effective technique, might help reframe it as not so much atheists against religion, but ethical people against, the scum of the earth. So do you think this might be a tactic that we could possibly try to utilize?
I've never received any support from any religious organization because I feel that they're thinking, well, it's the same racket, except we call ours religion, and theirs is called quackery by people who know. I don't think that's a good tree to be barking up, frankly. I have never received any support from any religious organization, either in expressions of support or certainly not in cash, that's for sure.
It's an interesting question. I mean, certainly the more mainstream, moderate religious arms are not in any kind of open support of faith healers and those kinds of open predators. Whether they're willing to engage publicly in combating it is another question.
In denial, yeah.
So, it's a good question. I'm going to take one more. We're already running late, but I wanted to give you folks this chance. Can I have one more question, maybe? I can't see. Is there somebody over here by the mic?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi. I was wondering, we have a good rise, I think, in a lot of great public science communicators, but I'm just wondering, Randy, do you see anybody taking up your charge of of continuing this skepticism. We have a lot of great personalities like Neil deGrasse Tyson and stuff like that, but it's not necessarily so focused to take on people like faith healers and something like that.
He's irreplaceable. No, that's true. But that said,
I retract my question.
That said,
I'm sorry.
there's an organization.
Yeah, oh yes, the James Randi Educational Foundation. Hallelujah. No, wrong person. But I will repeat, in fact, I will even do a small imitation of Harry Blackstone Sr. When I first saw him as a kid, I went backstage afterwards and got to know him, and I was doomed to become a magician. It was the sealing of my fate. I was going to become an archaeologist or a chemist, but archaeology and chemistry they didn't probably lose much by losing me, but maybe magic gained something from me. And Harry Blackstone floated this lady in the air, and she was in the air above him, and he stepped forward, and he lisped, I must say, but it was a lovely lisp. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll see this young lady suspended in the air between heaven and earth. And she could stay there for forever and a day, should I so desire. But in the interest of time and your patience, I will once again return her to the couch from which she rose only a moment ago. And he began with his hands like this. And she would float down to the couch, stand up, take her bows, and walk off. That was magic, guys. That was magic, and that's what sank me. And they got me into the company of people like this, if you can imagine that. Now, folks, yeah, I say that because this man, old man Blackstone, had such a wonderful influence on me. He brought me to this estate right here, and he is long departed, but he will always be very, very foremost in my memory. And I have a photograph of him on my wall, right beside Martin Gardner's photograph. And I say, good morning, gentlemen, when I walk into my office, because I have a certain amount of woo-woo going for me, too. And
let me know if you start getting the answers to that, okay?
I haven't heard anything so far.
Good, carry on.
But I've got your address right there and your phone number, so I know you want to hear about it as soon as it happens. I don't. The JREF, the James Randi Educational Foundation, my most devout wish, can you have a devout wish? Yeah, okay, all right. Is that it continues after my demise, and which is way up. People ask me how old I am. I say I'm 83 going on 100 because I have great hopes, you see. And I may not look like it, but I'm going to hang in there. The JREF, if it will survive me and go on for decades after that, that is my most devout wish. I really want that to happen. And we've got, look at DJ Grothe, who just took over, I mean, the JREF, and he did miracles for it. No, not miracles, I'm sorry. He did wonderful things for it, and has perpetuated our existence, I'm sure. And we have all kinds of supporters, including many people in this very audience who are very faithful supporters, and many people who joined our organization even today, hallelujah. No, wrong word. You know, this is very encouraging to me. The JREF is important to me. It's secondary only to my partner, which is a different matter altogether. That's personal. But the JREF comes second. It's a very close second, and I want it to be perpetuated. Anything you folks can do to make our lives a little easier or smoother will be most appreciated. My being invited to this conference here over this weekend has been quite a thrill for me, and I want to thank both Jay and Michael Feldman, of course, and the other folks who invited me here. I love them both. I love you all. Thank you very much.
James Randi.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.